Hello, in this tutorial we'll have a look at handling sequences of images. Now there's a number of ways in which sequences can be created and manipulated. So we'll start off with the simplest. To do that we go to the File menu, we'll say Open Image, and we'll navigate to a folder where we have a sequence file. We'll select the sequence file called clock.sequence and we'll open it. We're now prompted to put the image into a buffer, so I'll put the sequence into buffer A. The second way of creating a sequence is to load a series of files. This time we'll go to the sequence menu, select load frames and navigate to a folder where you have a series of images. The important thing is that the file name, in this case clock, is the same for all images, and that the images have a sequential number going from 0000 up to the maximum number. In this case I've got a total of 70 images, so it will go from 0 up to 69. So I'll select the first image, select open, I'm prompted to put the image into a buffer, I'll select buffer A, and it's now loaded, as we can see here, 70 images into a sequence image. Another way of creating a sequence is to use the create sequenced command. What this does is it enables you to select a number of images that are already stored in buffers and to create a sequence from those images. So I'll say create sequence, and at this time it's asking us either to select images or to select a group of images. So I'll select the group of images, I'll select image button B, and we'll go all the way up to image button R. We'll press OK, and it's asked where do we want to store it, and I'll store the result into image buffer A. And that's now taken all of the images from buffers B through to R and stored them as a sequence in image buffer A. In a similar way to opening images, we can also save sequences of images. The first method is to actually save the image as a sequence file. To do this we go to the File menu, we say Save Image, we select the image that we want to save. Now because we're wanting to save the whole sequence, we must press the image button rather than selecting the image window. So I'll select image buffer A. We're now asked to select the file type, and we'll say a sequence file, and we will give this image a name. We've already got clock.sequence, so I'll call it clock1, and we'll press save. That's now saved that as a sequence file. We can also save the image as a sequence of separate files. In this case we'll go to Sequence, Save Frames, we'll select the sequence image, in this case the image buffer button A. We will store this in a directory which we've called clock, and I'll give it a file name of clock, and we'll save it as a Windows bitmap format file. We press the save button and that now goes and saves that as a sequence. If we go to Windows Explorer, we'll now find that this folder has got a series of images starting with clock 000 going up to the maximum number of images that we've saved in the sequence. We can also take the sequence image and store it as a number of separate images stored in different image buffers. So in this case we'll go to Sequence and we will say Separate Frames. We'll select the image buffer, in this case buffer A, and we'll then say where do we want to start storing the images, and in this case I'll say image buffer B. And what this has done is it's taken the first image in the sequence, put it into B, the second image in the sequence, put it into buffer C, and so on. Now obviously we've only got buffers A to Z, which is a total of 26 buffers, so anything after image 25 in this case isn't loaded. We'll now have a look at working with selections of images within a sequence. Across the bottom of the sequence window we can see a slider, and we can move the slider to any given frame. So I'll now move the image to frame number 10, as can be seen here, and if we press the marker to the left of the selection bar, it will highlight the left hand edge, and this indicates the start position. If I then move the slider to, in this case, image buffer or frame 20, and we select the right hand marker, we can now see that we've got a selection of images 10 to 20. Now, having done that, we can then work on that selection. So the first thing that we might want to do is to copy the frames that we have selected from image buffer A into image buffer B. And what this has done is to create us a new sequence from the selections 10 to 20, which is effectively the 11 frames that we have. We can also delete a number of images from a sequence, and we would typically do this by selecting the items that we want to delete from the selection marker bar. So I'll select up to image 17. So we've got frame 17 selected, and we'll select this as the last image. So we can now see we've got images 1 through to 17 selected. And if I now go to sequence and say delete frames, what this is going to do when I select button A is to remove the first 17 images from the sequence. It's now done that, and we can see that we've now got 53 frames left in this particular sequence. We can also reverse the order of the frames in the sequence. In this case, we'll go to the sequence menu, select reverse frames, we'll select the source buffer, in this case buffer A, and we'll put the result into image buffer B. This has now created a sequence of images which, if we now play through, will go backwards as opposed to forwards in the original sequence. Additional frames of data can be appended to the end of a sequence. So in this case we've got an image in buffer B, and what we want to do is to append that onto the end of the sequence that we have in buffer A. To do this, we go to the sequence menu, we select append frames, we select the image buffer, and we can either select the window or the button itself, and we have to select the image sequence that we want to store this or append this to, in this case buffer A. And that's now added to the end of the sequence image another image, which if we move to the end of, we will see is the same as the data that we've just appended to it. The final functions in the sequence menu are the join and the split sequences. We'll start by looking at the split sequence. We will use the selection to select a point at which we want to split a sequence of images into two separate images. In this case I've selected frame 35 as the selection point. So we go to sequence, split sequence, and we're going to select image buffer A as the source, image buffer B as the first destination, and image buffer C as the second half of the split. And this has now created two separate sequence files, the first one being 1 to 34 and the second one being effectively 35 to the end of the sequence, but it's created it as two separate sequence files. We can also take those two sequence files and join them back together again. So to do this, we go sequence, join sequence. We want to join sequence B to sequence C, and we'll put the result into image buffer D. And this is now combined sequences B and sequences C into one new file, which we can then play through.